Hi, this is Farhana Goga. I'm a success psychologist and I help entrepreneurs to transform, expand, and amplify in their life, love, and business. This video is about brain spotting, a beautiful, amazing tool working with the brain body system to bring around healing, expansion, transformation, and all the yummy stuff in our brain. I'm going to work and I'm going to teach you about the science of brain spotting and then how we actually use brain spotting. So, when we work in therapy with the conscious mind, talking, pausing, for the most part, we're working with the neocortex. We're working with the conscious brain, the conscious mind. A skilled therapist, through that process, can access the unconscious through associations, through a little bit of hypnotherapy, through suggestions. But for the most part, we're working in a very conscious way. Our brain, however, is much more complicated. It has three different pieces. This is simplification, but it has three different parts of our brain. All the information that we get comes through our reptilian brain. So this is the place where we immediately decide whether something is safe or not safe. The information comes through the reptilian brain into the amygdala, and immediately we respond. We respond through our body. Our body goes into fight, flight, freeze, fawn if it senses danger. This information then travels up the brainstem and goes into our emotional brain before it can come into our conscious brain that might be able to have a rational decision. The rational decision that this might not be as dangerous as it feels. This does not mean X, Y, and Z. The stuff that happened in the past is in the past. Our lower parts of our brain does not have a sense of time. When faced in danger, when faced with what it perceives as danger, it responds as if it is happening right now. There is no time. Our brain also makes associations that we might not be aware of. It brings links into things that we are not aware of. This could be in the collective unconscious, in our family system, through memories that we might have, through links that it has made to keep you safe. It's a natural thing that we do. So, knowing that there's these different pieces of our brain and that our body is immediately attached to what goes on in our brain, sometimes we need things that are not just working with the conscious brain. And that is where the brain-based tools fit in. It's where things like emotionally freedom techniques fits in, brain spotting, BWRT, hypnosis, TRE, and a whole bunch of beautiful, beautiful modalities. So the only part of our brain that's external to us are our eyes. Our eyes are a direct link to our brain. So when we think of something, we might notice that we naturally look somewhere. So you've come home after a long day at work and you're just thinking about the day, and you just notice that your eyes just keep looking at a spot. As you're thinking about the day, that's a natural process that we call gaze spotting. With a professional, with someone helping you, they might use a pointer or they might help you find a gaze spot. And as you're looking at that, you might notice naturally, maybe you start thinking about something else. Maybe you get another perspective. Maybe your body just loosens up. That is what brain spotting is. We do it naturally. Children do it naturally. You might find a child, a baby, suddenly just looking as though they're mesmerized. Chances are their system is processing. So when given the space, the conditions, our brain will naturally process things in a way that is helpful. So often the associations that it makes naturally occurs under stress or distress or anxiety or under threat. And immediately our brain starts forming those associations. And those associations then become how we are in certain situations. And sometimes we don't even understand it because rationally, we want to experience things differently. The associations could also be, if you believe in past lives, could be past lives. It could be ancestral history. It could be the collective unconscious. It could be things that are in the cultural realm. It could be things that happened in a particular time of a country, of a society. It's just a natural thing that might happen. And that's the first place that any information passes through. And if you know you've had a traumatic experience, you can imagine that that is going to feel as though it's happening right now, in the here and the now, in this moment, because under threat or under an association of threat, our brain does not process time. So with brain spotting, we're going to bypass the conscious brain. We're going to use the conscious brain to set things up for us. Then we create the conditions so we can bypass the conscious brain and we can access things that are happening in the other parts of our brain and in our body. And with the right conditions, we're going to allow our brain the space so that it can disentangle itself and it can heal, because our brain knows what the association it has made and how to unmake those associations so that there's a much more healthy response. So what we're also doing is that we are working with our autonomic nervous system. We're working with what is called the vagus nerve. We are working with all of these beautiful, scientific, evidence-based things that happen in our body that decide whether the world is safe, whether we are safe, whether we are under threat, or whether we can come out of all of those and feel more connected to ourselves, more connected to the environment, and more flexible in the way we engage with the world. So through brain spotting, we want to give our system the space so it can go through all the associations that it has, whether those associations are sensations, images, behaviors that we might have, whether it's feelings that we may experience, whether it's meaning that we attach to things, whether it's something that doesn't even belong to us. Our brain can go through all of that and it can find a new way that feels safer, healthier, and better for our system. And then we can go and be in the world without being hijacked by the information as soon as it enters our system. So what we do with brain spotting is that the first thing we do is we decide what we want to work with. So we can either work with something that troubles us, we can work with a resource. So a resource is something that's internal. A resource could be external. A resource could be a person. It could be an activity. It could be a place. We can also work with an expansion. So expansion is something that you can bring in. So often in expansion spot, people see as God sometimes, your higher self sometimes, and sometimes it's just a simple thing. And the question that we ask is, what will give you the highest possibility of this healing, resolving, or moving you forward, or getting you to the next place? Sometimes an expansion spot could just be something that you wanting to achieve, and you can have a real feeling of what that would look like. And that could be an expansion. With brain spotting, we could also do parts work. So we could be working with inner parts of ourselves, or we could be working with different people in our lives based on our experiences on them. So we decide what we want to work with. And that is the frame that we use. And this is a conscious thing that we create. So you might decide, I want to work with my money issue. And then that's quite a broad frame, right? Because I could cover a whole bunch of different things. So you then narrow it down if possible. Sometimes we need to just work with a broad frame. But the narrower that we can get, the more focused our brain can be. And our brain can then go off and find all the different pieces, all the different files that are linked to that particular frame. So once we decide on what we're working with, we then notice what's happening in our body. So we might notice how we're feeling when we think about it. We might get a sense of, I feel really, really uncomfortable. That's an activation. While we're having that activation, and it could be quite an intense activation, we might want to bring in a resource. The resource could be, actually, I know I survived it, or the resource could be a person that we know truly and unconditionally loved us. It could be a place that we have an amazing association with. We bring in a resource. And if we can't find any of those, we get a sense, is there a place inside us that we feel relatively calm or neutral? And that becomes our resource. So once we decide what we're working with, we've got the frame, we then figure out what's happening in our body, create an awareness. And if you don't feel it in your body, that's absolutely fine. The idea is to get have an awareness of what is happening. So whether that's a thought, or whether that's a sensation, or whether it's an image, or whether it's a specific memory, or whether it's a meaning that you know you've attached, or a belief that you have created, and you have that awareness, you can then use that to find a gaze spot. So the reason that we're finding a gaze spot is because this is part of self-spotting. The reason is that when we have the awareness and we then consciously find a spot where that feeling that we are working with is more, it indicates to us that our brain has started working and our brain is getting all the files. If we go to a spot where whatever we're working with feels like it's nothing there, well, chances are we're not getting the right files from our computer. So we get the awareness, we get the frame, we get the awareness of what's happening, and then we find a spot. So first thing we do, we notice where it's in our body or where it is in our awareness. We look eye level center, and we notice whether that is that sensation or that feeling or that awareness is more, less, or the same. And then we look to the right, And once again, you notice if it's more or less of the same. And then you look to the left, noticing if it's more, less, or the same. Once you get a sense of where it is the most, so in an activation, it's the most uncomfortable. In an expansion, it feels the most expanded. In a resource, it feels the most resourceful, right? And with parts work, it's where that part feels the strongest. So once you have a sense of where it is, then what you do, so it feels like there's an activation to my left, your right, my left. And then you go back to just off center and you slowly move your eyes until you get the spot where it's the most. And then you'll notice it because something will happen inside you or in your awareness. Once you get that spot, we then move up. You don't strain your neck or your eyes while you're doing this. You move up and you move down slowly until you go, actually, it's most over there. So if you know that something is very activating, my suggestion is that you also bring in immediately before you start working a resource and an expansion. So remember, a resource is anything that is helpful internally or externally. And an expansion is any thought, belief that you have or that we can bring in that will give you the highest possibility of whatever you want to achieve. So whether it's healing or whether it is moving forward or whether it is bringing in the great abundance that you want. So whatever thought, belief that you have or that we can bring in, that will get you that. So it could be that in one brain spotting session, you could have a few spots. It also could be that you could start with one spot or two spots. And in the process, something happens and you kind of go, I think that needs a spot. And then you'll just find a spot. It's something that spontaneously happens because what's happening in your brain body system is all those files of brain coming to the fore. Things are coming up and out and working through you. And with that, you'll get a very strong, it's almost like, it's just like you just feel it. Like you honestly just feel it. And you trust whatever comes up. And if you kind of go, I keep going back to my grandfather, or I keep going back to a family story, or I keep going back to this one thought, and it's not resolving as you following the process that I'll tell you about now, create another gaze spot for it. So once you've set up your spots, so the first thing you do, frame, awareness, find your spots. If you are doing an activation on your own, definitely set up a resource and expansion. If you're with trained professional, they might just take you into your activation. Ideally, when you're self-spotting, we kind of want you to focus just using a resource and an expansion. But life is going to do, and your system is going to do what it needs to do. So you just trust it. So once you've done that, then you decide where you feel like starting. Once again, it's just a nudging. You will just intuitively know. You will just follow whatever comes up. You cannot get this wrong. You can't. Your system knows best. And you just have to follow your system. You just have to stay in the tail of the comet. So you decide, I'm going to start in my resource. And all you're going to do is you're going to look at the spot. You don't have to work too hard. You already know what the spot is. And you're just going to look in the spot, and you're going to be aware of anything that is happening inside you, around you. Sometimes it can be really strange because you could have external noise, you could have a whole bunch of things, and you just be aware of it. And you bring your attention back to you as you get distracted, or you just be aware that you're distracted, or you're dissociating, or whatever. You just be aware of what is happening, because what is happening is exactly what is meant to happen. So you keep looking and you just notice what's happening in your body. Notice, allow, follow with curiosity. Your main thing here is you be curious. You don't try and change anything. You don't judge it. You don't try and fix it. You just notice it. And if something is really uncomfortable, you just notice that it's really uncomfortable. And if you need to reassure yourself that this is safe because your system knows what it's doing, you do that. If it gets to a point where it's too uncomfortable and you kind of go, sure, I can't do this anymore, go look at your resource spot. Go look at your expansion spot. See if there's another spot that merges, right? So you're going to be kind and gentle to yourself and allow things to emerge. I know I kind of was looking at my resource and then I went and told you all of these things about if it gets too uncomfortable. So even when you're looking at a positive spot, so resource spot, expansion spot, even when you're looking at these spots, it could be that you start feeling a little bit nervous or a little bit anxious or a little bit negative around it. This is just coming up to be processed. So you look at it in curiosity, notice, allow, and follow. You really do this mindfully in awareness. And you can't get this wrong. And what you'll notice is that it comes in waves, right? And you'll start noticing that you naturally feel drawn to another spot. And you just follow those urges. It might also be that you might want to get up. You might want to touch a part of your body. You might want to move around, right? You might want to look at the spot from different angles. Whatever your system is asking you to do, you do. It might be that none of that happens, right? Even if you think that nothing is happening, you just go, not noticing anything, and you just notice that. And if you have another spot, then after a while, just look at another spot, and if you still notice nothing, you just notice that. I promise you that something is happening in your system. The reason that we use the music is because it then also includes the auditory part of our brain. So we're really working with all the different parts of our brain then. And it's looking at all the different vowels, right? So that's why we include the music. The music goes between both ears, and that's because it's activating all the different parts of our brain, right? So through brain spotting, we're allowing things to emerge from the bottom up, not from the top down, right? So we're really allowing our system to be our guide. And our system knows exactly what it needs to bring resolution, to bring healing, to bring expansion, to take you to the next place. And we just have to allow it, right? And sometimes that can be scary in ourselves because we think, if I don't have this anymore, then what? Right? If this isn't the way I react, if I can respond differently to the situation, what then? Am I giving away my power? Will I be taken advantage of? What would happen in that space? And even with that, you can be curious about what could happen with that, and let your system find its way in that through using a gaze spot. Yeah. So that whenever we clear something up, it makes room that needs to be filled. And that can be a little bit scary because it feels a little bit disjointed and unsettling, right? But we can kind of carry on the process so that it can be filled and the possibilities can expand and we can keep moving forward. So the key things to remember: create the frame, find the spots. Our brain knows what's happening and it can go and find the different things. And then once we're looking at a spot, your brain knows what it's doing, and your job is to notice whatever is happening, allow it without judgment, and follow it with curiosity so it can go where it needs to go, even if it doesn't make sense to you. And you just keep going. And if you naturally find another spot, or you naturally move to another spot, whether you've set it up or not, absolutely fine. And you can do this for as long as a little as you want to, and see where it goes. Once you've completed a brain spotting session, please have water, because you've used a lot of glucose. Have a snack, also because you've used a lot of glucose, because your brain body system has worked really, really hard. Knowing that it's going to carry on processing for your highest good to let things out so it can find a brand new, beautiful way of being safe in the world and connected to ourselves, to other people. We can create flexibility in our lives and the way we respond to things. So it's no longer so rigid and no longer a reaction based on things and based on associations that aren't even true. So that is what brain spotting is in a general nutshell. It's really accessing all the different parts of our brain body system, even and including our body, so that we can have the space to disconnect and remove any associations that should not be there and that got there to protect us because it was distressed, to keep us safe, and because it was the most relevant one at the time. And then to create a new way, an emerging way of being in the world and being with ourselves. If in your awareness, as you working, you kind of go, actually, the only thing I'm noticing is that my body, there's a part of my body that's really sore. That one, what you do, you take a spoon, a wooden spoon, and you put it on the spot that is sore, and your brain, your eyes will naturally, immediately go to your gaze spot. It's an immediate response that happens, and that becomes your spot, and you keep the spoon where it is. So that's called a body spot, right? So there's lots of different ways that we can work with brain spotting. The real idea is we're wanting to give our system the space so it can work out the associations and pull things apart so that it can be clean and fresh and clear and not contaminated by distress, by survival, so that we can be safe and connected in the world. So that's brain spotting.